if the only voice you have is pain, it's always going to tell you a bad story. But if you can change your relationship with pain and go, you know what, instead of being some scary, mysterious, vague thing I'll never conquer, it's actually a recipe of factors. There's things I can control. There's some things I can't control. But if I can take care of these controllable factors, get my pain level down enough that I can think, enough that I can breathe, enough that I can go to the store, then I can actually live my life. And the voice of pain will be quieted by all of the options that you actually have.
Welcome to the Joint Pain Podcast, where we have discussions on the science and art of fixing chronic muscle and joint pain. I am your host, Matthew Lister, the founder of Align Pain Management. Today I'm talking with Jamie Daniel. She got her Bachelor's of Science in Nursing at Indiana Wesleyan University. She worked as an RN in both orthopedics and oncology. She's a certified craniosacral fascial therapist. She is now a chronic pain educator and senior joint pain personal trainer at Align. When she's not at Align, you can find her in the great outdoors or West Coast swing dancing.
It's true.
So today we will be unpacking a concept we talk about frequently with our clients called the chronic pain spiral. Mm-hmm. Before we get into that, I'd love to talk about you a little bit. Why do you do this work? How did you get here? Why Align?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I consider it an absolute gift that every day I get to help people get out of pain, and that's what I do. I ended up at Align. If you had told me I'd been doing this, I'd be doing this. I never would have guessed. But I used to work in a hospital, and I also worked outside of a hospital as an RN, helping coordinate home health and various types of medical services. So I've worked in acute care and kind of outside the system as well. And I was getting really burned out and really tired of putting Band-Aids on bullet holes. And I felt like the patients were bleeding out and I was bleeding out and there was just a lot of blood everywhere.
Is this a metaphor or did this
well, that one day was really rough.
Yeah.
But after just multiple years of feeling like I was giving everything I had and it still wasn't working, it's really depressing and hopeless to feel so ineffective in the face of people's pain. And I was actually a client at Align before I was a coach. So because I know your wife, your lovely wife, I went to Align because my knee was collapsing. I was having trouble with my knee. I'd be standing or walking and it would just give out. And I was like, oh, geez, that's terrifying. And I had neck pain. But I didn't actually realize how much pain I was in until I got out of pain. As a nurse, you're just in a lot of crazy positions and you're moving patients and you kind of deal with it because another person's pain is always more priority over your own, and we can talk about that later. But so one day, actually, you stopped me in the hallway because I had referred my 860th person, because I would go around, Align's the best, you have to try it, oh my gosh. And you said, hey, what would you think about working here? And I realized that if I could help change the ecosystems of someone's lives, if I could help somebody understand why they were in pain, if I could give them the tools and they could get out of pain and live their life, then that was what I wanted to spend my time doing.
Yeah. Well, and so what I saw in you was someone who had such a heart for people in pain, but also you have attended more of my workshops than any single human alive. Every single workshop, even if it was like a repeat topic, I'm like, Jamie, I know you've been to this workshop. Yeah, but every time I go to this, I take something else away from it.
It was such quality information. And I'm working in the hospital. People are having knee surgeries, they're having hip surgeries, they're coming back for the other joint. And I'm in the chaos, and I'm hearing this voice going, oh my gosh, it doesn't have to be this way. And I'm like, there's another way. And I was so drawn to the truth of it and the reality of it. And then I was experiencing it as a client, and then I could see it happening in all the clients around me. And I was like, no, this is good quality. And so I kept coming back for more.
I loved it. I love it. So let's dive into the chronic pain spiral.
Okay.
Millions of people are lost in this nasty downward spiral with this sort of sucking weight that's pulling them deeper and deeper into this really sticky situation. Mm-hmm. I'd love to unpack that a bit with you. So we have a graphic that we use, and so just high level, the chronic pain spiral typically starts with stiff or weak joints, and then that leads into wear and tear, whether it's an acute injury or whether it's chronic degenerative conditions that you then find on MRIs later. So stiff or weak joints lead to injury or degeneration. That leads to pain, and then that leads to less movement and less sleep, which leads to more pain and more processed foods, more depression, anxiety. You can throw medications into that, which leads to more pain and less movement, which leads to stiffer joints and weaker muscles, which leads to more injuries and more degenerative conditions. And so it just becomes this downward spiral where one problem creates two creates four creates eight turns into 16. And before you know it, you're facing 3 surgeries, you've got all these problems, the deck is stacked against you, and you're like, how the heck did I get here when the early warning signs were there, but they were just 5 years earlier or 7 years earlier, and you sort of ignored the symptoms because, we're tough and we press on and we put other people's pain ahead of our own. And we're back. And we sort of ignore those pain signals. But our pain signals are really just there to alert us to a problem. And so if we ignore those problems, we end up letting the problems multiply, and then we get lost in this downward spiral. So I'd love to unpack that concept with you. I kind of just gave
absolutely.
like a quick 60-second overview.
Great.
So let's start with stiff and weak joints. I think the general public doesn't know how their joints are supposed to work. I think a concept that is very opaque to people is that your joints are supposed to work a certain way. And then when they don't work that way, that's called joint dysfunction, right? Can we talk a little bit on that?
Yeah, I think, I tell you what, I don't know much about my car, but I just assume it's working until it isn't. But then when it isn't working, I go to the mechanic and I find out what isn't working. And I think we for some reason don't realize that in the same way our cars need stewardship, our bodies need stewardship as well. And so if I started having knee problems, and if you're anything like me, you just think, I need to work harder, or I need to just tolerate this. It'll be fine. It'll get better. I've had pain in the past and then it went away. And so it's going to be fine. And then it keeps getting worse and it keeps getting worse. And then you just think, oh, well, I've just got to push it through more. And then it doesn't work.
It does not work well. Yeah. And I think people, there's just this disconnect where people don't realize that your big toe is supposed to extend backwards to 90 degrees and your ankle is supposed to flex 45 degrees and your hip is supposed to extend 15 degrees and rotate externally 90 degrees and rotate internally 15 degrees. There's all these metrics that our bodies should be able to do. Our joints should be in alignment, not knock-kneed or bow-legged. When we walk, we shouldn't be getting this sway side to side, or our pelvis shouldn't be collapsing. Our scapula shouldn't be tilted forward. All of this is measurable.
Yes.
And I think there's a disconnect where people will feel the sensation of stiff or weak, but they don't have the thought of I should go and get this checked out, to go get a well care appointment, to go get an evaluation to find out how are my joints actually working. I don't
50,000 mile checkup.
Yeah, I don't think that thought process is part of a cultural norm at this point in time.
Oh, not at all. And sometimes people just have access even getting primary care or getting into the doctor, but no, they wouldn't think, oh, my back's a little stiff. That's something that I could be, that could probably get better. People don't think someone could help me with that.
Sure. And so when we have joints that don't work properly, we use the term joint dysfunction.
Correct.
That leads to joint degeneration. Let's just pull some just pull some examples, some real world examples. So let's talk about the knee. We often, so knee replacements are
prolific.
I believe the number is 880,000 that will happen this year.
Sure.
That's a big number.
Yeah.
So what biomechanical dysfunctions lead to that particular degenerative pattern?
Yeah, so the knee has the unfortunate position of being trapped between your hip and your ankle and your foot. And so a knee should basically just hinge back and forth. It's not quite mobile. It shouldn't be doing wonky things on the side. But if you have an imbalance in your foot or an imbalance in your hip, then you're starting to have a hinge that is only moving on part of the joint, and that's going to increase wear and tear on half of it or a corner of it, and so it's just going to happen at a much faster rate. You're wearing through your cartilage. You can't really get that back, and then you go to the doctor. It's bone on bone. They say you need a knee surgery, and you're like, oh, I don't know how that happened. That's out of the blue. Why do I need a knee surgery? And then often, because the problem doesn't get fixed, you might need a hip surgery, you might need the other knee done, and then you just think you're a partially bionic man, and you're like, well, I guess that's just how life goes.
Yeah, genetics. That's
My dad had a knee surgery.
my dad had a knee replacement.
It's contagious,
so
my spouse.
Yeah. It has nothing to do with footwear. It has nothing to do with any of that.
No.
So the principle there that people can take away is that when your joints don't work properly, it creates hyper-focused areas of load and stress on the joints above and below, and then we get degeneration in that area because it's being stressed. And so we get degenerative patterns because of that, because of the joints above and below that aren't working properly. So now that we understand how joint dysfunction or stiff, weak joints drives joint degeneration, we then get pain, right? And when we're in pain, we move less, and we have problems sleeping. We have more sleep disturbances. Let's unpack that for a second.
Yeah, I mean, when you have more pain, you tend to think, oh, I should move less, and so you sit more. But because you sit more, your muscles atrophy. You get more degeneration. Or sometimes you think, oh, I'm gaining weight because I'm sitting here. I'm eating, things that make me feel good, or I don't feel good enough to stand in the kitchen and cook a meal. So I'm just gonna heat something up in the microwave. I'm gonna sit here, and then you're like, oh man, I really need to lose weight. So you do an exercise video online, or you go to a gym, and then you hurt yourself doing that. So then you sit more and you think exercise just isn't for you, or something, and you think, I've tried it and it just made it worse. So what am I going to do? But I think the thing that people don't realize is that not all exercise is equal. Not all exercise is the same. And so going on a walk every day, although beneficial for some things, cardiovascular, your emotional health, all kinds of things, going on a walk isn't going to help build a better foundation of load distribution for your knee. And so you actually need a quite comprehensive, clever approach to how to maintain your body. It's the same thing with, we've been talking about the car, but you've got to put the right fluids in the right places. There's different things that wear out. And so we don't put windshield wiper fluid in our gas tank. That wouldn't make any sense. We wouldn't even try. But with our bodies, sometimes we have this disconnect of like, oh, well, I'm doing some type of exercise. Clearly that's enough. But you wouldn't eat only one type of food and think, I'm eating a food. Clearly that's enough. In nutrition, you need a variety. And so there's specific things that you must do. And for exercise and for the body, there's specific things you must do. And if you don't do those, your body will let you know.
Yeah. And when we move less, we don't push inflammation out of our joints.
Absolutely.
And so we have more inflammation in our joints, and then we are hurting worse. And so that just starts that spiral all over again. I think another understated influence of not moving enough is that the rate of cartilage loss when we're not moving is actually higher than when we're doing too much. There's that really interesting piece of research where they looked at runners. They were essentially trying to prove that running was bad, and it was bad for your knee cartilage.
Great science to have a goal before you.
I mean, that's how I interpreted it.
Study.
Maybe the
Okay.
scientists weren't going after that, but the hypothesis was that running destroyed knee cartilage.
Got it. Okay.
And so they were testing that, and so they under X-ray they measured density and thickness of cartilage on 3 different populations: a high intensity running group, a group that wasn't running, and then a group that was doing a moderate amount of running. And what they were expecting to find was that the high volume runners lost the most cartilage. The moderate volume runners lost the middle, right, in the middle ground of that.
Yeah.
And then the people who weren't running, they lost the least, or they didn't lose any at all. Well, their results surprised them. So the group that lost the most cartilage was the group that was not running.
I love it.
Because it was a lack of movement, and so you
Yeah.
get less blood flow, and you start to get those that degenerative pattern. And then the next group that lost the most was the high volume, the people who were just doing too much.
Yeah.
And the people who lost the least, they actually grew cartilage. So it actually got denser and thicker. It was the group that was doing a moderate running program.
Amazing.
And I love that research because it just goes to show and highlight how much our body needs load.
Absolutely.
But not just load, but intelligently applied load.
Yeah.
Not reckless, rigorous load, not no load. There's a Goldilocks zone where there is a just right, and it's that intelligent prescription of load. And naturally, I love it because that's what we do for work. That's what we do professionally. So anything that confirms
that
what we
checks
do
out.
professionally, I'm always in favor of.
I think that shows the cleverness of the body, though, because your body changes. It responds to you. And so if you're not using cartilage, or if you're not needing cartilage, your body tries to conserve resources, and it's like, why would I build more if we don't need it?
Yeah.
And there you can see that through different walks of life, that if people don't use something, sometimes their body won't be as good at making it. I mean, you can overuse as well. Of course, there's an extreme, but sometimes if you take a medication that does something your body should do for you, decades later, you can lose the ability to actually create that, whatever it is in your body, because your body was like, oh, somebody else is doing it, I don't have to, or we don't need it, so I'm not going to make it.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
I think a really interesting example of that is astronauts who have been on the International Space Station. They do their 6-month tour, and then they come back, and their bone density is dramatically decreased.
Crazy.
And I don't know the exact number. I want to say it's 40 or 50% reduction in bone density, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And you go, well, what is that? Well, when you don't load your structure, our body is a structure made of materials. That is supposed to exist in our Earth's gravity field, and so it is designed to have load on it, and that's part of what maintains it. And so I think that piece of having pain and then moving less is it's such a critical juncture in the road, because you go, okay, I can move less, but what does that lead to? That leads to more inflammation, more dysregulation of my nervous system, more anxiety, more depression, worse sleep, more degenerative conditions. It's this T that is so tempting to do the move less, but it's so dangerous. It's so dangerous.
Well, and I think that comes back to the difference between acute and chronic pain, because a lot of us in our life growing up, we've had strictly acute pain experiences. And at no point did anyone ever tell us, oh, there's a different type of pain. And so, you get a paper cut, or you roll your ankle, or you do something, and every time you've had pain, a lot of times you rest, you don't move as much, it gets better in a matter of months. And so unless we interact with good quality information that's informing us that pain can actually be different in our bodies, be different in our nervous system, need a different solution because it's a different type of pain, we're never going to notice. Or I guess you notice when 20 years later you're like, well, the rest hasn't worked. But then
Eventually you come face to face with it.
You tried, right? Like you tried moving and it didn't work because the way that you were going about the moving wasn't the way that your body was asking and needing it to move. So it was still telling you, oh, that's dangerous. Oh, that's not helpful. Our foundation isn't good for that. Anything that you do too soon without the right foundation, although it could be a good step, it's in the wrong order and it will put you back as well.
Yeah. In my low back pain workshops, which you have been to, I will rattle off all the possible ways that you can treat low back pain. Mm-hmm. And it's like a list of like 40 or 50 things. It gets very exhaustive and very confusing. And that's the whole point. There's so many options at our disposal. But I always say, and the last possible option, and it's the most insidious, it's the most dangerous treatment that you can get. And everyone sort of like sits at the edge of their seat, and I go, rest. and everyone like, what? They hate it. They don't like it.
Tell them the astronaut thing.
Yeah. Because it's such an ingrained and biological response to pain. Sure. You're like, it hurts. I should rest it. Mm-hmm. But as soon as it goes from acute to chronic, rest just becomes a really insidious, dangerous treatment that leads to more degeneration, all of these other problems that we're talking about. It just multiplies them. And so rest is the most insidious one that I like to bring up.
I get it though. Like I get how people get there. When you're sick, you rest. Like there's an element of you don't feel good, rest will make you feel better.
100%.
You're right in so many different circumstances. It's just this is a different circumstance, and so you need a different approach.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Okay, next one.
Okay.
More processed foods. Let's talk about that.
So the thing about being in chronic pain is you are miserable and you can't think straight. You're so tired. And we were actually talking about this the other day. Sometimes you have this like limited amount of energy, and sometimes you have to work, or maybe you have kids, and you only have so much energy. And it's like, what are you going to spend that energy on? Probably not grocery shopping, food prep, complicated recipes, chopping vegetables. No, you're going to be like, okay, there's quicker, easier food, and it tastes delicious, and I feel good when I eat it, maybe not later, but that is going to be something where you're like, I can save time there, I can save energy there, and it's just such an easy thing to, it's so, that's the thing, is that the convenience just walks you right into this really unfortunate partnership where you eat more sugar and then you gain weight, and then now you have more weight on those joints that aren't working well, so now you're destroying that cartilage even more, and then you have more pain, you have more inflammation, so now you really can't stand there and cook or whatever. Maybe you can't make it through the grocery store to pick up your items, and even if you could, maybe you can't remember your list because there's so much fog and there's so much confusion. It's too hard. And so you do the easy thing, which is feeding yourself whatever's easy and quick.
Totally.
And it wrecks you. And then you get depressed, and then you can't go out, and then people stop inviting you to things because you're always saying no, and you feel sad. So then you watch another movie and you eat another snack, and your world gets really small, and you're like, I don't know how this happened.
The spiral goes on.
And then you can't sleep.
Yeah.
Oh
yes.
My goodness.
And so the problem with processed foods nutritionally is that they will typically have more refined sugar.
So much sugar.
They'll have salt. Is there anything? I mean, those are the big ones in my mind. I mean, people will also go after alcohol. Yeah. Is there anything else that you would want to throw into that?
I mean, I being unable to eat dairy or gluten, I would say there's a heck of a lot of dairy and gluten in things, and some people are more sensitive than they realize, and it's hard to avoid. So yeah,
and so when you eat those foods, you create gut issues, you create inflammation, and it just makes the whole problem worse and stickier and heavier, and it just makes it harder. It gives you brain fog and all these things.
And your body's working harder to process those things, and so you don't feel good. You don't feel awake in your system. You don't feel alive to your system. You feel kind of sedated and sluggish after eating really processed foods. And so that's really not motivating to go to the gym as well, because you don't want to get up. You're like, oh, I got to take another nap.
Yep.
Yeah.
When we are not sleeping as well, when we aren't moving as much, we will get more depression and anxiety and loneliness and fear, all of these psychological sort of concurrent factors after that.
Well, and I think not just fear, but shame. Like, you can have so much shame because you ended up in a place that you never thought you would be there. You know, when you were a kid and you dreamed about your life, you never thought, oh, I'm here, I'm stuck in pain. I have back pain, I have knee pain, like I can't go on a walk, I can't go on a hike, like this is my life. I don't look the way I thought I would look, and it's so depressing and discouraging. And I think the thing about is sometimes you can have this terrible self-talk where you're like, oh my gosh, other people get out of pain, why haven't you? Like, you just aren't working hard enough, you're not doing a good job, you tried that thing, or you should just make yourself work really hard. And not only fear, but you can have this shame spiral where it's all your fault, and then you definitely want to eat more snacks after that conversation.
This memory is like burned into my brain. One of the most defeating moments of my life. I was walking up to a friend's birthday party. Yeah. It was for my friend's child's birthday party. Okay. It's like a 2-year-old's birthday party, and I'm walking up on a cane, and it was like an 8-9 level pain day. It was like just the whole body is tensing, you're sweating, and it's like 55 degrees outside, like that type of pain. Yeah. And I'm like walking up on my cane, and I see the party, and the dad of the 2-year-old bends over, picks up his daughter and throws her in the air, and she laughs, and he catches her and puts her down. And it hit me like a semi-truck. I couldn't do that. Wow. And there was no hope of me ever doing that. Like there was Gosh. So I couldn't be the dad that I wanted to be. I couldn't be the man that I wanted to be. And there was no hope of me ever coming out of that, because I had had so many sort of failed experiments of physical therapy and chiropractic and 3 back surgeries and all the cortisone injections and IDEP procedure. I mean, the list just goes on and on and on. And that type of loss of your identity and loss of your dreams and your hopes and everything that you wanted for your life, it impacts you, and it's devastating, and it causes depression, it causes anxiety, it causes you to disconnect from the people in your life. Right. And it's just a sticky part of this situation, right? And what the research shows is that the people who have the highest incident of depression alongside their chronic pain are people who lost an activity that they loved, which makes sense, right? When you lose the activities that you love, when you lose your identity, things that you held as your identity, and you lost that because of the pain, it leaves this vacuum in your life, and all that's left is the pain. And it's like, that's depressing.
Oh, I know. When I was having trouble with my knee, and I was thinking, oh my gosh, if I take a step and my knee collapses, that's it. Like, I'm going to have a long road of recovery. I'm going to tear something. And if I thought, oh my gosh, I'm not going to be able to dance again, like, that would be so crazy, because it's such a source of joy. It's a social experience. It's something that brings good things into your life. And so if you can't move, there's so many things you can't do, and it gets so painful. When you are lost in pain, and if pain is the only voice that you have, it will tell you terrible things. It will tell you horrible stories about who you are, about what your future is going to be like, whether it's tomorrow, in 5 years. Pain will always lie to you and tell you this is all there is. You're never going to get better. And it's just this horrible story. And so when you're stuck in chronic pain, you really, really need different voices of truth. And I think that's why I kept coming back to your workshops because I was in a world of pain myself, working in a world of pain that was supposed to be the ticket out of pain, but I wasn't seeing that happen in the hospital. I was seeing it happen in the gym. And so when I found a voice of truth and I was like, oh my gosh, he's saying it doesn't always have to be this way. I'm thinking, that's hope. And hope is scary, because if you dare to hope like you did all those other times with all those other things that you tried and they didn't work, your friend, oh, this will work for you. I'm out of pain. It's magical. It's great. You just need to do this and it'll be great. And you try it and maybe it helps a little or it doesn't work at all. And you're like, I have used up all my hope. If the only voice you have is pain, it's always going to tell you a bad story. But if you can change your relationship with pain and go, you know what, instead of being some scary, mysterious, vague thing I'll never conquer, it's actually a recipe of factors. There's things I can control. There's some things I can't control. But if I can take care of these controllable factors, get my pain level down enough that I can think, enough that I can breathe, enough that I can go to the store, then I can actually live my life. And the voice of pain will be quieted by all of the options that you actually have. And so.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that is so powerful. And when people are sort of getting pulled down by this spiral and it's starting to go faster and faster and faster, and they ask me, like, how do I get out of this? This just seems so hopeless. It's exactly what you said. We have to put a halt on the downward spiral, and it's just going to slow it down, and then we're going to slowly make progress up. But then we start to create an upward spiral, and that upward spiral does the same thing. It starts to speed up as you keep moving up. It's like as you start to work on the mobility of your joints, you start to push lymphatic fluid out of them, and so you push inflammation out. And so now you've done two things. You've reduced pain, drinking more water, drinking a little bit less caffeine, eating a little bit less sugar. You don't have to fix every problem all at once, but you just make these small little changes, and
that'll help you sleep.
And that'll help you sleep better. And so we just start making these little tiny adjustments, a little bit more walking, mobility work, a little less sugar, a little more water, a little less caffeine. You really can start to halt that and start to turn that spiral upwards instead of downwards. But it's a process, and the progress is almost indistinguishable day by day. And it's these small little changes that as you make more and more and more, and as you make more, you get the option of adding even more of them back in. Now you can start doing cardio. Now you can start doing stability or strength training, and then you can start doing you can start to sleep better, and then all of a sudden now we've got some real progress being made. And so the best way to navigate this chronic pain spiral is to start to make these small little behavioral changes, make these tiny little adjustments in the environment that all by themselves don't seem like they would be overly powerful, but when you string 5, 6, 7 of them together, they give you the ability to add in another 5 to 10, and then they give you the ability to add in another 5 to 10, and then all of a sudden you have some momentum. And I think that's the piece that is difficult for people to see when they're down in the depths of that situation, is that there is a way out, and it's not going to look like grand victorious action on day one. It's going to look like indistinguishable behavior changes week over week over week over week, and adding one tiny little thing in per week, and then in 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, you don't even recognize the situation anymore because you have so much momentum and so much more forward progress, even though no one step was grand or victorious.
Yeah, you really, with pain and getting out of pain, you need a comprehensive plan. And it helps when you have an expert or a plan, because you can do these little things, but because you won't see progress right away, you have to think, okay, I might not feel better tomorrow, but I'm going to feel better in 4 to 6 months. And when you have that alone, you can do it every day because you're not waiting the next day saying, did it work? Did it work? Did it work? But there's so many things that okay, if I have an expectation that this is going to get better tomorrow and it didn't, I might stop doing the good thing.
Yeah.
But it just didn't have enough time to work. And
Yeah.
so I'm the kind of person that I'm like, if you tell me what I need to do, I'll do it. But I was so lost, I didn't know what to do. And then I didn't know how long to do it for.
Mm-hmm.
And then somebody would recommend something new, and I didn't know, do I keep on this course for longer? Or do I start doing that thing? Or do I do them both? And it's expensive.
When should I start to see changes from this?
Yes.
Yeah.
Is this really working? Is this actually even going to solve the problem I have? Or do I have a different problem and I need this other solution over here? And so...
Yeah, it's confusion.
Yes.
And it's...
So little steps, but knowing that you're even on the right path, that path is even going to connect to that pain problem and get you out of that is huge.
Well, and I think that's why the North Star principle that we teach is so important. I always say that it's the most important principle because it gives us that thing to navigate toward. It's like, does the mobility in your big toe matter to your low back case? I don't know. But I know that you need an adequately mobile, stable, and strong joint system with a healthy and regulated immune and nervous system.
Yep.
So let's move toward that. Is this the thing that's causing your pain? I don't know, but let's fix it and find out. And then you do that enough times and you fix every problem on the deck and you got there.
You're like, maybe it was the big toe, maybe it was something else. We took care of them all.
Who knows? You just fix every problem. And then when you've fixed every problem, the likelihood that you will have fix the pain is just extraordinarily high.
I have never talked about a big toe so much in my life before I met you.
It's such an important, important
I never
joint.
thought about my big toe. The only time I thought about was when I was painting it. That was it. That was the extent of our relationship.
Now you have such an intimate relationship with your big toe.
And now I'm grateful for it. I'm like, oh my gosh, good job, big toe. You're helping me walk. Well, feet, it's crazy, right? We just think our feet should work. We don't pay them any attention, and then we're just like, they're probably fine.
Maybe.
Hopefully.
And then we wake up one day and they're smashed in and they're hammering and
like,
your
oh my
arch is
gosh.
collapsing. And
Your 70-year-old toes are,
facing a knee replacement and you have back pain. I mean, who knew?
So weird.
Who knew?
How did that happen? Oh, I love it.
Is there anything else that you feel like we need to unpack here?
When I've been facing chronic situations that are so hard and so painful, realizing that doing it on your own is really hard, especially when you don't feel good. And then it's daunting considering, because someone could be so discouraged. Oh my gosh, they're telling me I have all these things wrong. But it can be encouraging because you realize that it can be done. It actually can work. And you just didn't see the extensiveness of your problem, but it was a puzzle and there's all these different pieces and we can help you put it together in a way that makes sense. And on your own, you just had pieces across the floor that were scattered and you didn't know where to start because you didn't know what the picture on the box looked like. Mm-hmm. And so if we give you the picture on the box and we put in some corners and you can start to see it fill in and you get this shape, you start to have this hope of like, oh my gosh, maybe these people know what they're talking about. Maybe this really will work. But when you're just staring at pieces of your life on the floor, you don't even know where to start.
Yeah. And
so it can be overwhelming, but when you realize there's a process out of your pain, it really can work. I think that's a big deal.
I can't say it any better than that. That was such a good illustration. Awesome. Well, I think we got it. Thank you so much for doing this with me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank you for watching the Joint Pain Podcast. I'm Matthew Lister, and if you want help walking through your chronic pain journey, you can find more information at experiencealign.com.